Welcome to part 2 of Global Knowledge's New Paths to Learning at Work. How can you link new technologies to on-the-job training? So you mentioned social learning. What do you mean by that, and what is its role in training?
Yeah, social learning can be a pretty broad concept, and it means different things to different people. But at Global Knowledge, we see it as the use of social media in all of its forms for learning and development purposes, quite simply. So by social media, I'm talking about things like LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, and basically the web is a social environment now. So taking advantage of those types of tools to help people learn in the environment through the types of informal learning approaches we were talking about earlier. Although in the workplace, tools like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook are public and consumer tools. Internally, inside organizations, there are tools that serve the same purpose as some of these consumer tools. I'm thinking of things like Connections and Yammer and VMware, collaborative tools that are emerging that are inside the firewall, if we want to think of it that way. So at Global Knowledge, we think about using these social tools in 4 ways for learning and development. The first is as an adjunct, or even as sort of like a back channel, if you want to think of it that way, for formal training. So a classroom program can be going on and have a whole social environment that supports it. Secondly, these types of collaborative tools can be used in a way that are integrated and are central to the learning program itself. So teams of people can be working remotely in a social media environment, a social networking environment, working on business cases and solving case studies that are part of a learning program. So in this way, we're starting to spill away from formal learning and enter into that informal learning approach that we were talking about earlier. Third, so that would be sort of as an adjunct to instructor-led learning, use as a collaborative type of learning integrated into the program. Another approach would be to develop communities of practice. So these environments are for people to work together in an online environment using a social networking type of tool, where they can share information with each other, share best practices, upload documents, talk about what worked, what didn't work. These are the types of things that people do when they work every day, but learning is a byproduct of that kind of activity. So the more learning professionals and HR folks can support and pull new information and new best practices out of those activities, that's what we mean by communities of practice for learning and development. And then finally, these types of tools are just emerging as tools that people use every day on the job. And as I mentioned before, learning is just a wonderful byproduct of using collaborative tools. So when people work together, they learn. And the challenge for learning and development people is to simply capture that learning and format it and structure it in ways that they can feed back into the organization to help others.
You mentioned mobile learning. Isn't it just traditional e-learning delivered to a new device like a smartphone or a tablet?
Well, yeah, it can be that. It can be that, and sometimes it is. But can you imagine an e-learning program, an interactive e-learning program on a smartphone? You know, with the small bit of real estate you're trying to interact with a program. So it doesn't always work so well. It can work in a tablet environment where you have a little bit bigger screen. So mobile learning is more than that. It's restructuring and redesigning information so that it's available on demand as needed by people that are using that device. Sometimes it can be a full e-learning program if you have a tablet device. So really there's the new challenge is trying to design something appropriate that meets the need in the workplace that is suitable for that particular device. And there's also another challenge with mobile devices in that some of the learning applications that might be developed can be developed as an application that sits on the local device, or it can sit on a website that's accessed by that device. So those pose challenges as well for how you approach the design and development of information and e-learning that's going to be delivered by a mobile device.
So how is learning being affected by generational differences?
A good question. There are differences in the way Gen Y and millennials, or the approach that they bring and the preferences that they have for learning when they enter the workplace. They're a little bit less patient for classroom and traditional approaches to learning, and want information and resources available to them while they work, you know. So it really does match up nicely to the types of approaches we've been talking about so far. And also, with the popularity of video games and gaming approaches, I mean, you can see the use of games in other parts of business now as business sometimes administrative and other types of business processes are being gamified. Well, the same thing is happening in learning. So things like game mechanics and game thinking and badges and points and leaderboards are being brought into the design of learning programs as well. And it sort of happens in two ways. One is like structuring a game a learning program with those game elements included in it or embedded in it. But also those game structures and game approaches are being used to motivate and engage learners, employees, to access traditional training. So, for example, you know, they may access an e-learning program or a classroom training program, and in doing so and applying those skills on the job, they can earn points and move up a leaderboard. So it adds sort of a friendly element of competition to the whole notion of learning, which starts to engage employees and motivate their interest in different ways than traditional training did.
Watch the HRM newsletter for the next installment, where global knowledge expert Tom Graham discusses the long-term implications of new learning techniques for HR. Want to learn how to bring these new paths for learning into your organization? Register for the free webinar with Tom Graham. Details below this video.